Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video we're going to be talking about new car orders and the fact that the new car that you recently ordered potentially will be delayed for an extremely long period of time, or you might just not get a vehicle at this point. And so with all that being said, we're going to get into the reasons behind this and then what you can actually do if you are in this situation. And yeah, let's get straight into the video. Now at this point, most of you have heard of the microchip shortage, and it is obviously affecting the automotive industry in a hugely negative way. Now, if you don't know, the average new car requires about 1,000 of these microchips, and so if there's no microchips to be had, there's no cars to be had. And so yeah, we've got that. But why is this issue happening? And initially it looks like it was just because of the factory in Taiwan, which produces most of the microchips for the US automotive industry. They were having issues with producing microchips because of COVID, also because of environmental reasons. Apparently there's a drought over there, and with that factory, they're right next to a river, and they use the water from the river to cool down the machinery. If there's a drought and there's not enough water, or there's no water, we don't have anything to cool down the machinery, so they cannot produce microchips. So there's that initial issue, and that's what it looked like, again, on the surface level. But that shouldn't be enough to really disrupt things as much as they're getting disrupted, because then it's like, okay, well, if they can't produce the chips, then just go to other companies that do. And this is where the issues kind of come in. So most microchips are invented in the US. However, they're usually produced overseas. So what will happen is someone in the US will go and invent a basically smaller microchip that is more efficient, and then they'll work with companies, or they'll go and build a company overseas to actually produce these microchips. And usually there's a pretty big divide. There's usually the people that invent the chips and then the people that manufacture them, and they kind of just work together, if that makes sense. So that's kind of how things go. And because of that, we are limited with options in terms of who we can go to get these microchips. So that's kind of the first issue, is we don't really have a whole lot of manufacturing here in the US for these microchips. It's pretty much all overseas. And once you have something that you are getting a majority of it out of your country, there's all sorts of things that can happen, You can have, again, environmental factors like what we're having. There can be political factors. There's just so many different things that can go haywire that will prevent you from getting that product, even with shipping, I mean, there's so many things that could happen when these parts are getting shipped across the ocean to the US as well. I mean, you could have any number of things can happen, Now, aside from that, again, that's an issue, but it shouldn't be a huge issue, because yeah, we had some lockdowns and everything with COVID, but everything's pretty much opened up. Shipping is pretty much opened up, so that all should be pretty much fine. But there is kind of a deeper issue. So when COVID first started, a lot of the automakers were not getting nearly as many orders from dealerships and from customers. And so because they weren't getting as many orders, they kind of canceled a lot of their contracts with these microchip companies. And so what did these microchip companies do is they then went, okay, well, we still need to make money. So they retooled their factories to build microchips for other products, because the automakers said, yeah, we don't need those anymore. I know that we were ordering this amount, but yeah, we don't need it, And so they go and fill that gap in terms of their product with someone else. And so all these factories retool to build microchips for other types of products. Well, then everyone in the automotive industry comes back a few months later and goes, by the way, we have this huge demand for cars now, and we need to build a bunch of cars. We need a bunch of microchips. And then the factories go, okay, well, we're building microchips for these other companies, And on top of that, we retooled our factory, and it's not like an instantaneous process to retool a factory. It takes quite some time. We retooled our factory to build microchips for these products. So if we want to build microchips for you guys again, then we've got to retool our factories again. And so then that's another issue that has come into effect, is the automakers cut everything off, and then they came back, and they're like, nope, actually we need it. And so then there's kind of this gap in terms of what's happening with the factories and producing them, because they need to retool the factories again to be able to produce these microchips. And then I guess the last thing, again, I kind of already mentioned this, was the fact that most of them are produced overseas. There are some companies that do produce them here in the US, but they kind of fall into that same category, where if they were producing microchips for these automakers, the automakers pulled out, and so then they retooled their factory, and they have to do the same thing. So the overseas companies are dealing with the same thing that the US companies are dealing with. There's just not nearly as many US companies. Now, there are some fixes that are basically getting implemented to fix this issue, and part of that is building out more factories here in the US to build these microchips. The government has come in with quite a bit of funding to basically support this. But the problem is this is not going to be instantaneous. I mean, to build these factories and to get everything going from an infrastructure standpoint and an employment standpoint and all that kind of stuff, it's going to take years. And so the problem we're having right now is going to be prolonged until the current factories can get retooled to be able to build these microchips for the automakers again. And then on top of that, the factories that are having environmental issues, right, like Taiwan, can try to figure out something new and creative so that they can continue to produce microchips at the rate that they were prior. And then obviously all the other supply issues that are happening because of COVID restrictions and lockdowns that are still implemented in certain countries. And then on top of that, because of political reasons as well. But I'm not going to dive into that too deep because we're just going to try to make this about cars. But let's get into what you should do. Now, what should you do as a consumer? And the recommendations I made in past videos still kind of stand. So if you really don't need a car right now, I wouldn't recommend purchasing at least a used car, right? It's a great time to sell a car, not a great time to buy one. It's just like the housing market. You're going to pay a massive amount of money just to get any car because of these supply issues. Now, on the new side of things, it can be worth it to buy a car because there's certain dealerships that just won't mark up vehicles no matter what's happening. They just never charge over MSRP. I work with quite a few of those dealers from a filming perspective, and so that's part of the reason why I know that. And then obviously I talk to a lot of people in the automotive industry. And so if you can find these dealers that aren't going to be charging over MSRP for new cars, it definitely can be worth it in terms of purchasing something because the value will still be there and you're not paying an exorbitant amount in markup on the vehicle. Now, aside from that, if you are ordering a vehicle, you need to do a couple things. First off, if it's a newly released vehicle, you need to just jump on it. You can't have that mentality where I'm gonna think about it, right? I had so many people that did that with the new Gen 3 Raptor and then also with the new Ford Bronco, and then this was last year, but with the Ram TRX, where they went, oh, I'm gonna think about it, I'm not exactly sure, instead of just jumping and ordering the truck, right? And then what happens is 3 months later, they go and they try to order it and they can't find one, and then they find out the only way for them to get one is if they pay $40,000 over MSRP for a used one, or one that's at a dealership that's marked up a crazy amount. And that's what happened with the TRX, and I promise that'll happen with the Gen 3 Raptor and with the Ford Bronco as well. Just examples for the video. But yes, if a vehicle just got released and you can order it, you need to order it right away. If you have a dealership that'll sell it to you at MSRP, order it. No questions asked, just get it done. Don't be stupid about it. If you want the vehicle, right? If you think you're gonna want the vehicle, just go and order it. Worst case scenario right now, you're gonna get the vehicle, you're gonna hate it, and then you just sell it in the used car market and make a ton of money because of how inflated car prices are right now. Aside from that, again, you want to get that early order in so you actually get a vehicle, because what's going to happen is I'm sure there's going to be tons of cutoffs where people just aren't getting vehicles. So for example, with the Jeep Wrangler SRT, a lot of dealerships had tons of orders in for that. Like, I knew a dealership that basically had 15 orders in and they got 5 allocations, and these weren't just like casual orders. All of these customers had $5,000 deposits on this SRT Wrangler saying, hey, I'm willing to give you $5,000 to assure you that I am going to pick up this order when this vehicle comes in. And right, Jeep was like, yep, we're only going to build 5, right? We're going to give you a third of the allocations that you asked for. And trust me, that's going to happen with a lot of these vehicles. And so you want to get an early order because of that. And just understand that there's a pretty high chance that you order a vehicle right now and one of two things will happen. One, it might just not get built whatsoever, right? They might just say, yep, nope, can't get an allocation for that. Or what will happen is you're going to have to change the options on the vehicle a major amount. I saw this just a ton with GM recently in terms of the options you can get on their vehicles. It's like you can't really order out anything. It's crazy. So understand that you might not get any of the options that you want on the vehicle. You might have to completely change the order. And then also understand that it just might be the next model year or something like that. And I think that's going to happen a lot. Like, they're just going to have a bunch of orders pushed into the next model year. And I mean, I kind of partially expect that with like the Gen 3 Raptor that I ordered. Obviously, they said they're going to build a few 21s and then they're going to start building 22s. I think what's going to happen is because of this shortage, they're not even going to be able to build the 21s in time. And so my 21 order is probably going to turn into a 22. And so expect that to potentially happen with your order as well. There's just all sorts of things, I guess, that you just need to come in with a proper expectation. Again, that first off, if you can get one at MSRP, jump on it, get it in quick. And then again, understand that you might not be able to get the exact options you want at this point because a lot of stuff isn't available. And then on top of that, your order just might not even be accepted right now, or it might be moved to the next model year. And so as long as you have those proper expectations coming in, then you aren't going to be disappointed. And so yeah, it's kind of a crappy place to be, but it's just what the market is like right now. And that's going to sum things up for today's video. If you do happen to be stopping in for the first time, I'd really appreciate it if you'd subscribe, comment down below what you think, and then if you do feel like my videos are of value to you, I'm going to include a link to my Patreon in the description down below. I'll see you guys.